I never would have envisioned myself here, penning my personal life for view on the internet. Even if it's only to help me make sense of it all. After all that has transpired over the past year, I feel like I need to get it out. Growing up, I always knew my family was complicated. Maybe by telling my tale, I can start to put the pieces back together. But really, I'm not sure where to start. Although I was an only child, it was not by decision. Evan was my younger brother once. He was 3 years my junior, and he disappeared from our lives suddenly 5 years ago. Though I vividly remember it as it occurred yesterday, I was 8 at the time. Although my parents were upset, my mother was particularly so. Her ideal family size has always been large, hence, Evan's death affected her in ways I cannot quite grasp. She was just 52. But from then on she seemed to age overnight, becoming nearly totally protective of me and yet distant at the same time. Complications following Evan's birth told the physicians she could not have any more children. Losing Evan transformed her. It not only wounded my mom, but also became her only hope. Like a part of her had passed with him. She grew aloof, even from my father, and she clung to the dream of a daughter one day. For her, that developed nearly into an obsession. She would always tell about how much she desired a small daughter, occasionally even mentioning she had names chosen. My father did everything he could to help her heal, to bring her back to some sort of normalcy. But her obsession never subsided, even though I knew she loved me. She sent that unmet need to my cousins, particularly the girls. At family get-togethers, she would spend hours helping them with their hair and makeup, in addition to purchasing for them gifts. I held it against her, not in contempt. She seemed to be grieving in her own manner, and perhaps that was the only way she could manage. When I met Lily, my now ex-wife, 2 years ago, I never imagined how much her addiction would ultimately shape our lives. I simply kept quiet and learned to accept it as part of our family life. Through a buddy, Sarah, I ran across Lily at a business function. Working as an administrative assistant, Lily was 26. She looked lovely, friendly, and seemed to have strong family values that I appreciated. Lily had recently broken off a long-term relationship and was wanting to start over, Sarah informed me. We hit it right away, and shortly after I brought her home to see my parents. Lily's response to my mom was powerful. She met her and started to literally cry. Lily reminded her of herself at that age, she said. And from that point on, she treated Lily as the daughter she had always wanted. Lily appeared to like the attention, and I was glad to see her connecting with my mother. Mom would phone her almost daily, inviting her over for lunch, planning shopping trips together, and even introducing her to relatives as the daughter I finally have. Looking back, I should have seen the signals. Mom gently pushed me toward dedication with Lily. She would gently remind me that excellent women did not linger around indefinitely, and that I should lock down a lady like Lily before someone else did. She would even defend Lily when I brought up reasonable issues, such as her tendency of last-minute cancellation of our dates, or her unwillingness to discuss her former relationships. After a year of dating, Lily and I got married. I believed my mother, and she was so delighted about my relationship with Lily that I discounted these things. Mom insisted on paying for everything and was ecstatic. She claimed she wanted her daughter to have the ideal marriage. She plunged herself into planning with such fervor that she sometimes neglected to ask Lily about specifics. Somehow, Lily was not bothered. She appeared perfectly happy to let Mom run things, and I let it slip since I was so busy working. Though it was a small ceremony with just close relatives and friends, it was lovely. There were some awkward times, though. Lily was always checking her phone during the reception. Though I told myself it was only jitters, it felt strange. Saying he had a bad feeling about it, my dad drew me aside and questioned whether I was sure about marrying Lily. I dismissed it. Our first 6 months of marriage were somewhat uneventful. I was too enthralled in the thrill of the day to notice any persistent uncertainty. Lily left her employment, stating she wanted to concentrate on growing our family, and I backed her decision since I made a nice wage working as a software developer. think it was great when she began discussing helping out in the community and doing some good. Things changed when Lily's old friend David returned to town. I assumed it would keep her occupied as we got ready to create a family. She said they had lost contact once he started college, although they had been close in high school. They would first only get together for coffee sometimes, and Lily clarified that she was supporting him in adjusting to being back. Although Lily's reunion with an old friend was great, my mother was delighted with their friendship and said it was lovely of Lily. Their coffee dates soon grew more frequent nonetheless. She would have arrived home late, occasionally smelling alcohol on her breath, and would have told me tales of assisting David with one thing or another. When I tried to discuss it with her, every time I expressed a worry, she would jump in and accuse me of being domineering and discounting her concerns. My dad tried to warn me once more, stating he observed changes in Lily's conduct, but my mom shut him down every time she insisted Lily was just being a friend to someone in need of support. She would contend that he was experiencing paranoia and advised him to be appreciative of the relationship he and Lily had. This created conflict between my parents. My mother supported Lily no matter what. Then, everything collapsed. I discovered Lily and David in our bed one day early from work as I was not feeling well. The worst of it was that neither of them appeared especially embarrassed or startled. I couldn't stay another moment. Lily turned to face me and just said, "I guess we need to talk." Expecting support, comfort, anything that would help me make sense of what just happened. I packed a bag, tossed some clothes, and drove directly to my parents' house. Instead, I discovered something I never could have predicted. Lily was more worried about my mother than I did. I was stunned and hurt, and honestly, I felt betrayed. She said things like, "Everyone makes mistakes," and begged me to forgive her for the sake of my marriage. She even contacted Lily while I was sitting there, begging her to come over so we could sort things out. Things just grew worse in the next few weeks. Lily said she was pregnant, and even though I was first dubious, my mother recommended I get on and be a parent. Saying family is family, she maintained that DNA was irrelevant and that I owed it to Lily and the infant to be there. I sought divorce, but to my dismay, Lily's mother backed Lily in her struggle to keep me bound to this child. That's when the legal battle started. Claiming I had driven Lily into David's arms and that the child required a stable home, my own mother testified against me. The judge mandated a paternity test following the birth of the kid, but my mother was totally focused on helping Lily carry her pregnancy until then. After the first shock, I found myself in a dark and perplexing place. She was even building a nursery in my former bedroom. I kept wondering why my own mother, who had reared me and taught me to be honest and faithful, was suddenly supporting the woman who had deceived me, and how quickly things had gone south. Nothing fit. 2 weeks after the whole thing began, Lily moved in with my parents, and I began to see just how far this dream would stretch. Saying her lease on her former apartment was up and she hadn't been working. She said she had nowhere else to go, and she couldn't afford a new home. Wanting nothing to do with the baby, Jake had ghosted her, leaving her in need of somewhere to live. With a worn-out, dejected look on his face, my father told me all of this, and I could tell how much he was hurting too. My mother changed my former bedroom into a nursery, spending hundreds of dollars on baby equipment, clothes, and decorations. She greeted Lily into their house with wide arms and even rearranged the house to make room for her and the infant she was carrying. She shouted back, stating he was selfish and that the baby should now come first for our family, while my dad objected, telling her she was irrational. Family get-togethers became horrible. She seemed to have turned on a switch and put everything else on hold for this baby, totally neglecting the suffering and betrayal I was going through. Mom told everyone Lily was pleased to be a grandma and boldly walked Lily around, introducing her as my pregnant daughter. She had even established a group chat with all the female relatives to organize a baby shower, all the while utterly ignoring that I was still waiting for a paternity test and was in the process of divorce. It seemed as though I had been completely removed from the scene. Then something I had not anticipated occurred. Sarah, the person who first brought Lily to me, called to let me know. She seemed annoyed, and I knew she had been battling something. At last, She admitted she had to tell me the truth as she could not keep quiet anymore. Sarah claims Lily and David had been seeing each other for months before I came upon them together. They would get together at his house, Lily having covered her affair with volunteer work at the community center. Lily had never really volunteered. That piece hit me like a gut strike. The worst aspect of Sarah's confession was not even the affair. All that stuff about wanting to give back was a total lie, a cover tale for her to spend time with David. According to her, before I learned about Lily and David's connection, my mother had known about it for at least 2 months. Sarah claimed she had actually seen my mother lunching with Lily and David in a cafe. It was all a lie and my mother knew. She looked ashamed but immediately recovered when she walked over to their table, presenting David as Lily's old friend helping her with some community projects. Along with knowing about Lily's affair, my mother had covered it up. She neither told me what was going on behind my back nor cautioned me. She had been shielding Lily and David, allowing me to enter a marriage under false pretenses. It seemed as though my whole universe had changed. Shaking with wrath and uncertainty, I got into my car and headed straight to my parents' house. When I confronted her, my mother did not even try to dispute it. Saying she hadn't told me as she was worried I would leave Lily, she acknowledged she had known about the affair for months. Her justification was that the baby, this child we knew was not mine, was a godsend in disguise, a means for her to at last have the daughter and granddaughter she had always wanted. I glanced at her, trying to understand what she had just said, feeling as though I hardly knew this woman standing in front of me. She really had the nerve to tell me she saw this as her second chance. Her own son. How could she betray me in such a deep sense? Her response also marked something I will never forget. She stared me squarely in the eyes and said, "Sometimes, being a mother involves making difficult decisions. Lily and the baby need me more right now than you do." My father, who had been working in the garage, overheard the whole exchange. Looking more angry than I had ever seen him, he entered the room and insisted on knowing how she could keep something like this from me. The answer given by my mother was astonishing. She charged him with never having the daughter she had always wanted, and not knowing her grief from losing Evan. She made it sound as though my father had no right to question her since he hadn't experienced her kind of loss. That night, my father entered the guest bedroom and hasn't spoken to her since then. Every day he calls to check on me, apologizing often for not seeing through things sooner. Saying he can't live under the same roof with her anymore, he has hinted at wanting to sell the house. Meanwhile, my extended family grew split over the circumstances. Mostly from the elder generation, my mother had her devoted followers who repeated her family is family motto and advised me to take care of the baby even though she wasn't mine. But what my mother had done appalled others as well. Regarding Lily, she was playing the victim. My aunt, the sister of my mother, told me privately that her behavior reminded her of how she had behaved following Evan's death, completely illogical and closed off to any explanation. She painted me as the merciless husband who could not move past her infidelity, and thanks to my mother's support, plenty of people believed her. Some of my closest friends took her side, believing her story. She told everyone who would listen that I was abandoning her and the baby, and that I was being cruel and unforgiving over a simple mistake. Friends who believed I was being selfish, not supporting my wife and child through a trying period. I lost folks I knew for years. My mother fed this story, calling everyone who would listen stubborn and selfish. She even told family I was heartless for demanding a paternity test, stating I was depriving her right to be a grandma. The stress began to control all aspects of my life. I couldn't focus, so I had to take time off from work. My supervisor, while understanding, couldn't let me take indefinite leave. I visited a therapist to help me sort through everything, but progress was difficult since every day seemed to be a fresh betrayal. My mother was overjoyed when Lily revealed on social media that she was having a girl right, when I felt things could not get any worse. She reposted Lily's post with a long, poignant note on how blessed she was to at last have a granddaughter, and how excited she was to see all the mother-daughter moments she had dreamed of. She also neglected to mention her own son, who was enduring this catastrophe. Through all of this, I tried to hang on, to calmly wait for the paternity test following the birth. She seemed as though I no longer existed, That day was only the beginning of the nightmare that followed. The dream only deepened in the days leading up the baby's birth. It was not only the waiting, it was also witnessing my mother actively choose Lily over me, the son she raised, to support someone who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Though I was mistaken, I had assumed that the betrayal by my mother had already peaked. 2 weeks before Lily's due date, I received a call from my father informing me Lily had relocated even more of her belongings into my parents' house. My world was about to fall apart even more in ways I could not have anticipated. She informed my mother she had nowhere else to go, but I knew it was really another performance meant to keep her on her side. Though my mother was all too willing to indulge her, my father attempted to keep out of it. My dad argued with her about draining their retirement money, but she shot back saying he didn't understand, and that this baby was a miracle. I felt more distant from my mother than I had ever known. She took Lily shopping for baby supplies, and redecorated my old room into an elaborate nursery, and even used part of her retirement savings to start a fund for her first grandchild. She utterly dismisses me as if I were an outsider, parading Lily around like a valued visitor, calling her my pregnant daughter at every family function. The whole incident gave me the impression of a ghost in my own household. Worse, Lily used social media to provide emotional bulletins regarding her pregnancy under the alias the struggling single mom, deserted by her abusive husband. Around that time, I got another call from Sarah, the friend who had first brought Lily to me. She said, "Man up, do the right thing," and reposted everything, calling me a proud grandma-to-be. Friends and family who didn't know the whole story rallied around her. She sounded more agitated than she has lately. She hesitated, then admitted she had more to tell me. Lily and David had been involved for years, not only having an affair for a few months as it happens. Sarah claims they had been together on and off since high school, never actually splitting apart, only taking breaks whenever it would be most convenient. The truth hit me like a kick to the gut. They had even stayed in touch while Lily and I were dating, acting as though they were simply old friends. Lily had arranged everything. She merely sought security. She never planned to be faithful, and I had been the ideal mark, a diligent nice guy with a consistent work schedule. I had stepped straight into their plot, totally blind. Not all that mattered, though Sarah was terrified and was apologizing, saying she never thought it had been so horrible. The most startling aspect of Sarah's disclosure was that my mother had known about Lily's relationship with David the whole time. Apparently, months before I found them sleeping together, Sarah had spotted my mom with Lily and David at a cafe. I drove over to my parents' house, scarcely able to control my feelings. She even overheard my mom chatting to Lily about how she was doing the right thing by staying with me for the baby's sake. When I approached my mother, she hardly even tried to dispute it. She knew all along, she said. She said she had kept it from me since she knew I would be leaving Lily, and she feared missing her chance to at last have a granddaughter. I stood there, staring at the lady who had reared me, wondering whether I even knew her at all. She even tried to make me feel bad, saying that if I loved her I would understand and that I needed to let go of my pride. She added, regardless of how Lily's pregnancy turned out, that it was a blessing. She wanted this baby, even if it meant souring her relationship with me in order to have it. She steely-eyed me when I asked her how she could betray me like that and responded, "Sometimes as a mother you have to make sacrifices. Lily and the baby need me more right now than you do." My father, who had been listening from the corridor, intervened at that point. His anger was strong. He informed her that this was plenty, that she was ruining our family, and that her fixation on a daughter had made her stranger to him. They argued loudly, my mother accusing him of never understanding her need for a daughter and claiming he was ungrateful for all she had done for our family. Saying he couldn't remain with her anymore, my father left the bedroom and into the guest room that evening. It felt like my family was fraying at the margins, but nothing equipped me for what was next. The baby was born 2 weeks early. Since my daughter was being delivered, my mother contacted me continually, leaving furious voicemails stating I should be at the hospital. Not because I didn't care, but rather because I could take it no longer. I turned off the calls. Lily had a healthy baby girl. My father respected my need to digest events on my own terms and kept me informed from a distance. My mother wasted no time in flogging images of the baby all over social media, calling her my first grandchild, and gushing over the miracle of at last getting a granddaughter. She was already sure this child was her chance to be the mother she had always wanted to be. It made no difference to her that we were waiting for the paternity test. The test was conducted the day following the birth. I was not the father as I had expected either. The findings verified David, not me, was the biological father. I briefly experienced a wave of relief, proof that I was free from this mess anymore. But Claire, Lily's sister, called unexpectedly when I was attempting to sort everything. Claire was crying. Not after witnessing the devastation I had been through. She informed me she couldn't keep quiet anymore. Lily and David had never split, she said. Years earlier, even before Lily and I crossed paths, they had been subtly close. Their scheme had always been to exploit me for financial support and stability while they kept their relationship under cover of silence. Then Claire delivered a surprise. They had even teased my nice guy reputation and laughed at how readily I had fallen for their charade. Only a few months into our marriage, my mother had learned about Lily and David's whole scheme. She had confronted Lily about finding text messages on her phone outlining their plan. Rather than alert me, my mother decided to keep their secret. Though it required sacrificing me to attain it, she considered it the means to at last acquire the granddaughter she had always wanted. I was in shock, fury and anguish churning together into something I could not quite identify. Lily had promised my mother she would let her be the main grandma. How could my own mother, the one who reared me, turn her back on me so totally? She had known all along and followed suit only to fulfill her desire of having a granddaughter. By now, my father was staying with me. He attempted to console me, but I was too numb to pay attention. That evening, I put a thorough message on social media. I labeled everyone who had left me out, everyone who had sided with Lily, and everyone who had dubbed me a deadbeat. I sent screenshots of Claire's text messages, the paternity test findings, and every bit of proof Lily and David possessed of their dishonesty. I wanted the truth right out in the open. I was not seeking pity. Once I stopped letting them paint me as the villain, the reaction was rather strong. Those who had supported Lily and my mother apologized. Some even begged for pardon. Friends who had left me acknowledged they had been mistaken. Though it was mixed, at least I had at last cleared my name. The most startling response came from my mother. She dug in rather than apologizing. She arrived at my apartment frantic and insisted that none of this changed the reality that I should step up and raise the child. My father, who was with her when she arrived, eventually snapped. She said the child was innocent and that DNA didn't define family. She even claimed this was God's plan for her to at last have the granddaughter she deserved. She needed professional assistance, he informed her. Her preoccupation had destroyed our family. Right then, at my apartment, he declared he was divorcing. My mother collapsed, alternately blaming us both of being unkind and begging him to stay. Lily, in a last-ditch attempt, sought to assert that she had acquired actual affections for me during our marriage and that she had intended to call it quits with David. She seemed to be losing all sense of reality. Her sister Claire, however, exposed even more messages showing Lily and David mocking me. Even on our wedding day, joking about how easy it was to fool me. Any love I could have had for her was long gone. David usually wrote a public apology, but not to me. I didn't file for divorce. He moved in with me while he straightened out his life. He apologized to Lily for not being ready sooner and vowed to step up now that the truth was out, framing it as some twisted love tale where he was suddenly ready to be a father. My mother moved between wrath and pleading, unable to believe that her actions had consequences. The storm wasn't over yet. I thought that finally cutting her off would end the agony. But my mother only dug in deeper, clinging to Lily and her baby with everything she had. She sent letters, cards, and even tried contacting me via mutual acquaintances, insisting that I was abandoning my family. The consequences of everything tore across our family like wildfire in the months after the paternity test. About a month following the test findings, my father broke off from my mother. Though the emotional harm was difficult to overlook, the split on paper was clear. The judge gave him half of their savings. When my mother burned through some of it to help Lily and her child, what remained? She even had to sell their house to pay the balance of the settlement. Her final purchase was a little condo, conveniently close to Lily's new baby's residence. My father moved in with me for a period, and I could see the weight easing off his shoulders a little daily. He seemed almost like a new person without my mother's persistent preoccupation overhead. He started exercising out, registered at a nearby golf club, and even started dating once more. He told me one evening over dinner he hadn't felt this free in decades. Long before Lily entered the scene, he revealed that my mother's obsession with having a daughter had loomed over their union. He stated he regretted he had seen the symptoms earlier, and that he had let her drag our family into this lunacy for so long. Regarding Lily and David, their circumstances became a magnificent disaster, and I would be lying if I said none of this was my fault. Over and over, he told me nevertheless that none of this was my fault. After the paternity disclosure, they had moved in together and behaved like the contented couple on social media, but things went rapidly wrong. Not long after everything surfaced, David lost his employment. His company apparently discovered his affair with Lily and how he had been using false pretenses to cover time off to see her. Following me on Facebook, his boss's wife saw my post and reported back to David's company. Lily was trying to land a job at a couple nearby companies, but her reputation preceded her. Nobody wanted someone with a history of dishonesty and manipulation hired. My mother, however, was still totally devoted to being a grandma. She watched the baby 4 days a week while Lily looked for employment, and David picked odd work wherever he could find it. She was running through all else Lily and David needed: clothes, baby supplies, and whatever else remained of her savings. After most people unfollowed her on her old social media accounts, she even set up a grandmother and granddaughter photo session and posted it on her new accounts. She reinterpreted history, which most unnerved me. She had placed those pictures everywhere, calling herself blessed and thankful for this miracle. She dared to ask whether I would be interested in adopting the child. They were having financial difficulties, and David seemed to be proving to be as erratic as I had expected. She said I should be ready to volunteer to provide the child a stable environment, since I'd almost been the father anyway. Saying this was an opportunity for healing, and that the baby may bring our family back together. My mother sent a protracted email reflecting the same attitude. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer without reply. For those who had deceived and misled me especially, I was done with the concept of being anyone's backup plan. My attorney reassured me that there was no way I could be held legally liable given the paternity test and all the newly discovered facts. Still, my mother resisted letting go, since the idea that they even had the guts to suggest it demonstrated just how little they knew. She hired a genealogist to locate some hidden relationship between our families, so she could support her claim to grandmotherhood. She kept calling the infant her granddaughter, and set up a whole Instagram account dedicated to her precious girl. When my father and I found out my mother had been borrowing money from family members, claiming it was for emergencies, we later discovered she had been channeling those funds to support Lily and David. It was like seeing someone create an intricate web of lies and self-delusion. I wanted none of it. Disappointed by her manipulative strategies, other family members cut her off completely. For my part, I cut off all communication with David, Lily, and Mom. On every platform, I blacklisted them and advised mutual friends that anyone attempting to bring communications from them would also be blocked. Unable to accept this, my mother started writing letters to my office, as she couldn't find my house address. Acting as Lily was now in some permanent form in our family, she would ask me to reconcile with my sister and accept my niece. Every letter ended up in the shredder. The only silver lining in all of this was the closeness I developed with my father. Almost every week, we shared meals and recollections, and over time, I came to see just how much he had silently suffered. He was constantly reminding me that my mother's behavior had nothing to do with my value or any wrong I had done. She was acting out of unsolved problems, and he helped me to start to rebuild by reminding me of my life, job, and personal future. I started dating once more, carefully this time, and concentrated on my work, where I had lately been promoted. I even started getting ready to buy a house outside of my mother's condo in another area of town. Some family members, those who had not been involved in the mess, advised me to try to forgive my mother, saying she was acting out of unresolved grief from losing my brother all those years ago. My dad said he was planning to move to the same area once he found a place, and the thought of a fresh start somewhere new felt like the beginning of something I desperately needed. But it was not that straightforward. Seeing her intentionally choose to assist the individuals who misled and betrayed me, and then attempt to rewrite history to make herself the hero,